I am your host today, Lance Hart, and since we'll be talking about the Anywhere workforce, today we are working and broadcasting live from the Cincinnati Reds Stadium, the Great American Ballpark. And today joining me is Justin Rice and John Lloyd. And you both have worked with many organizations making the shift to an anywhere workforce. I'd like to see if you guys can discuss the commonalities across your clients and what it takes to build the workforce of the future.
Yeah, thanks, Lance. First off, beautiful day here, Great American Ballpark. It's awesome. A little warm, but great. Hey, John. So a couple of things that we see commonality-wise in a remote, distributed, anywhere workforce, and frankly, this has become pretty prominent, really, I would say, over the last 18 months. You know, not to harp on it too much, but clearly the pandemic has changed the way we operate as organizations. Specifically, what I see a lot, John, I'd like to get your take on it, is really three key trends that IT organizations kind of struggle with is how do I make sure my users maintain a great common user experience, meaning they're not having to jump through hoops to access tools or technology or whatever that may be to get their job function done. I also see the network. You know, what is the network really architected for this distributed workforce? And the last piece of that, which has become incredibly prominent over the last couple of years, is the security aspects. So, John, if you don't mind, I'm really interested in talking through, first off, the user experience side of things. How do you see their IT organizations working with their end users to make sure their applications aren't impacted?
Yeah, so I would start with, I created this phrase called the new normal. I don't know if you've heard that. That's something I made up. But the first thing when I start talking with customers is understand that this is permanent. We've convinced ourselves for the last 18 months, going on 24 months, that this is hybrid or someday we're going to go back. And that's true for some companies. Some companies are all the way back. Some companies are hybrid. Some have shut down offices across the globe. And this is permanent, right? We're seeing the great resignation because employees want that flexibility. Employees want the ability to work from anywhere, to work from home. Well, not everybody can work from Great American Ballpark, right? So that's a nice benefit we have. But that importance of the end user experience, that's got to be critical. That's got to be number one. The reason why you think about an IT team in any organization, your customer is the employee. And 98% of that workforce is not technically savvy, right? But what they are is we are seeing the most informed, non-technical person that you've ever seen across our industry. Meaning at home, I've got 3 wireless access points from call it a Google Wi-Fi, things like that. So my home is networked better than it ever has been. I have this expectation of always on. I have this expectation of 15 to 30 connected devices in my house and constant streaming and high bandwidth dedicated just to my house because of fiber and GPON networks, like Fioptics. So when we start talking about the user experience, the first is to understand the expectation. And that expectation is no delay, no downtime, always on. And in the past, we used to network that by building out high availability in our data centers, by putting giant pipes in, by connecting all of our sites with private low latency networks, right? All of these things that people expected when they came into our office. The biggest thing that I always talk with customers about that I always see is what I would say is kind of a misconception is them saying, we've closed 100 offices. We've closed 1,000 offices. You haven't. You've opened 500, 1,000, 5,000, however many employees you have, right? So to the question of the application, well, the first thing is I've got employees that can literally live and work anywhere, and that can change. We're seeing a lot of people get out and take road trips, and connectivity with 5G and LTE, I'm always on. I can always connect. So I got to get back to that application. And that starts with geolocation and geo-distribution. When I've got 2 physical data centers or 1 physical data center and that application lives in my network, that's a problem because I may be in Toronto and my data center's in Dallas. And then I may be in Seattle and I'm still coming back to Dallas. So the first thing is cloud. The advent of cloud, 10 years ago, we started to see people slowly migrate, maybe certain applications, certain workloads, but you still had a lot of people who said, I'm against the cloud. So the first big winner in this new shift of work from home is cloud adoption. There's just no way for you to financially be able to take an application and distribute it across the globe without utilizing a cloud provider. The second has become Well, you don't control those networks. You don't control those redundancies. And so as I take an application and I start to move that out to the cloud, right? Maybe it's Azure, maybe it's AWS. I don't know exactly how that's networked. There's a little bit of a Wizard of Oz, the man behind the curtain. I know I point to an IP address. And so we're seeing multi-cloud as really that new strategy of I know I've got to get it out of my network. I got to make sure it's always up. And what would happen if I had a complete outage? And we've seen cloud providers.
Well, I'm going to interrupt you there, John, because I am curious on your thoughts. Like what I've seen specifically would be, so we talked about networking the cloud in the past, right?
Yep.
We've talked about networking to a headquarters, to a data center, and to the cloud, and that cloud may be a public cloud provider, it may be SaaS or some other web service provider. What we've seen over time is, even in the multi-cloud world now, containerization, right? So now not only do you have maybe folks adopting AWS, Azure, GCP, but now they may be leveraging containers, microservices to run those same applications across all those clouds. So it's very interesting to me and compelling as we talk through the distributed workforce, how we still maintain ubiquitous application connectivity with those applications living all over the place.
Yeah, so let's translate. Let's translate what you just said for the folks at home, right?
Yeah.
In the past, when you moved to the cloud, if we had a cloud outage, I would affect everything. So my email's hard down, that's a big impact to my business. And now as we start to look at microservices and we build these out into containers, one, I've got a common infrastructure, a common underlying platform that I can develop and build on.
Yep.
But the second thing is, when I do have an outage, it only affects a sliver of that application. And so whether it's I pass a bad code, whether it's something gets caught up in the network and my load balancing isn't able to connect to it, I can continue to stay up and running. And that's that other part of not just performance, but that frustration of I'm working from home and I keep clicking the application and it's not working. And that is always the dreaded call into the IT staff, right? Is that it's not working, right? That was hard in your network where you could see it and control it. Now it's even harder when it's somebody's house, right?
Yeah.
It's like, you become Geek Squad tech support, right? You have no idea what else is going on in that network. You have no control over it, but you're expected to deliver this same sort of performance. And so I think cloud adoption, and to your point, microservices really is the big winner. And one of the things too, and I'd love to get your experience on this. One of the things I saw people slowly adopt the cloud pre-COVID was the cost, right? The concern of, well, my data keeps growing and growing, or my applications continue to grow, and my costs are going to get out of control. When we build out data centers, right, I've never understood that, right? People said it, that's fine, that was their personal belief. But if I'm building out for X, let's say my volume is 500. I build out for 500, maybe 700 for a little growth. Well, now I've exceeded that. Well, now I'm throwing away that hardware, and I'm buying new hardware. Mm-hmm. Or maybe the other side's true. I'm planning for 5 years from now, and I'm buying 3,500 instead of 500, and I never get close to it, and I've paid for something I don't use. When you talk with customers, what are they saying about everybody went to work from home, elasticity went through the roof, has it shrunk, has it continued to grow? What are you seeing for that kind of cloud cost model?
Yeah, well, so it's certainly not linear. So what we saw a lot of times when organizations struggled, especially in the beginning of the pandemic, in getting all of their users ubiquity app connectivity, they're like, okay, let me get to the cloud. Let me just get to the cloud so I can get ubiquitous connectivity there. Well, what that meant a lot of times is taking what they have in the data center, literally, in the tech term is lift and shift. They're lifting it up, moving it to the cloud, putting it there. What they didn't consider a lot of times, and not wrong by any means, we were constrained with time, is a lot of those apps maybe weren't, you're not getting all of the cost efficiencies because they're not cloud natives. They're not ready. They're traditional, homegrown, meant to be in a data center app. So kind of from an economics perspective, again, not kind of a linear thing, because once you're in the cloud, now what we see is organizations going back and saying, this traditional app that I lift and shifted, I need to refactor that. I need to make it cloud native because I need to take advantage of all of the tools the cloud gets me, and also take advantage of the economic flexibility that that's going to be. So the economics of it are incredibly interesting as we've seen organizations run through. One thing that I wanted to touch on before we kind of got off the user experience is also the security aspect. One thing that we noticed kind of right out of the gate, we've talked about, and John, you and I have even been on these webinars, we've talked about decentralized or centralized security over time, and how work from home, work from anywhere breaks that model. Like, what I'm not going to say, hey, John, here's a firewall, put it in your backpack, anywhere you go, I need you to take that firewall, unpack it, plug it into the network, And that's your security box. I'm really interested, John, in your thoughts on the security aspect of work from anywhere. Like, how do you address the fact that you're not going to have a firewall to sit behind?
Yeah, well, hopefully you don't have that physical box, right? That's the first thing, right? We talk about applications moving out of the data center or moving to the cloud. What I think the biggest trailer to that's starting to catch up is the last application that still continued to sit in a brick and mortar building was security. It's an application, that's all it is, right? And that firewall, that security posture, however many layers you had, maybe you had email security. A lot of people still keep email security on-prem, even though their emails moved out to the cloud, right? Because they're doing data loss prevention on-prem or whatever that inspection is they're looking for. It's got to come through my security posture. So my firewall's in my data center, my email security is in there, whatever you want to call it. IDS, IPS, maybe it's a different device. These are the two things I think you're going to see. Well, you already are. The first is convergence. The idea of having 7 different vendors for 7 different layers of security, those days are over.
Yep.
You don't get the cost efficiency. It's too hard to manage. You got to try to find people to specialize, IT staff or IT partners. That's a big problem. So I think you're going to see a convergence. The second piece is, all right, I've solved this problem, right? My folks were traveling the country. They were taking advantage of, some of this personal time and some of this less stringent work from the office environment. And so I moved my applications to Azure. I moved them to GCP, and everything's working great. And I moved to SaaS, and I finally got the last person on my IT team that's been anti-cloud. They haven't had a choice, right? Cloud has won the day, except security. So now I'm sitting in Seattle, and my application, I'm in a West Geo zone, and I'm going to Seattle, except that I have to first VPN and come back to my data center in Dallas, that we talked about in that earlier one. Yeah. So the big winner now is SASE, right? And not only is that fun to say and a cool term, but that secure access service edge. That's the difference. Is what we're doing is saying it's not about a firewall. If I can live and work anywhere, and my application can live and work anywhere, I got to secure it as close to the application as I can, right? And so that's the first thing. We took that data center box, we got rid of it, and we started to secure our perimeter, regardless of what that looks like. The other piece, though, love to get you kind of talking about, what about my PC? Is my laptop a firewall now? Am I a firewall? Me, as an individual, if I don't have a box in the data center, and you told me you just put my firewall out in the cloud and called it SASE, what's happening now? How do I connect?
Well, I like to talk through kind of zero trust network access, actually. So that's one key component of SASE is zero trust network access. You mentioned VPN and kind of how we've historically connected, and many of us still do today, is you connect via VPN and you're on effectively the LAN, the local network of your business. Yeah. So what we've seen, and SASE's done a great job kind of industry-wide adopting this, is zero trust network access. So now, John, I'm going to, by default, deny you access to everything. And I'm only going to allow you to the applications that you need to access. So I'm protecting you, regardless of where you are, and protecting my company, my organization, all of my LAN assets, because I'm only giving you access to what you need access to from an application perspective. So certainly the shift from just a kind of end-to-end VPN solution to a zero trust network access is a big way to protect not only you, the employee, but also the organization.
So what does that do? We talked about how people mistakenly think they made IT's life easier by closing all these offices, right? And it made it infinitely harder when we went to work from home. Do we do the same thing with zero trust network access? As we look at SASE model, as we look at ZTNA, is that something that makes my IT staff need to grow? Do I need to staff up? If my life just got harder, treating you as an individual security posture rather than my network?
Not necessarily. So it certainly could. So you go to any trade publication, you're going to see a gazillion zero trust network providers. You're going to see a lot of SASE, SD-WAN. You're going to see a lot of choices out there. However, you start to see, you mentioned this earlier, this kind of centralization of products, I guess, if you will. It doesn't have to be. So the operations component, having a single dashboard to log in from your entire SASE framework, so your network connectivity, your VPN, zero trust network, having an entire dashboard, if you will, to manage that, helps make that transition for your IT organization so much smoother. Yeah, certainly you could pick and choose your technologies and make things a little bit more difficult. It doesn't have to be that way. And we see a lot of our partners specifically starting to really hone in on that centralized management to help ease that transition for IT organizations. Are you seeing the same thing?
Yeah, so I think you hit it spot on, which is that single pane of glass, which is being able to create profiles, being able to create templates. You may have 3,000 employees, but there's probably 10, 15, 20, maybe 30,
right.
maybe, depending on how complex, but you have these profiles. And one of the things I talk with customers about is we're already treating our individual for years, right? We've had GPO policies, right? We would push updates out to that device.
Yep.
So for us to administer a network at the device really isn't anything new. It's about getting that visibility, right? That's the biggest shift. Is I used to just have to worry about my attack vector being this box. It's a physical piece of hardware. I get logs out of it, and I'm good to go. Now what happens to that, right? I actually have 70 firewalls if I move to a SASE, right? I've got POPs, points of presence, all over the world. That's the whole point of it.
Yep.
So I've got to have this single pane of glass, and I've got to start bringing telemetry in, and I've got to integrate my network to that. I've integrate my logging to that. And along the way, as we kind of talk about what we're seeing, for anybody on the LinkedIn Live or joining us, please feel free to put questions in. Loved it. The whole point of this was to be conversational and not be prescriptive, but really just share insights. What are we seeing? Not necessarily focus on specific winners in spaces or not, but what is the technology shift?
Well, speaking of, so I want to. You mentioned telemetry data. I'm really intrigued on telemetry data as it relates to your security, your user experience, and your network. How that world kind of meshes together when you talk through the single pane of glass.
Yeah. So the concept of it's not working, that was hard enough when I controlled your PC plugging into my switch to my router across my private network, right?
Yep.
To try to find where was that at. Well, now we're introducing cloud as transport, right? We're introducing bandwidth from broadband, from cellular. You're seeing, low latency satellite is around the corner, and this is even only going to open connectivity up even further. CBRS spectrum for rural, right?
Yep.
So we've got all of these different connectivity types that have different profiles, that behave differently, that bring with it different jitter, latency, delay, and different internet peer points of where they hand off, right? So that becomes a really important key for me. I've got to understand the path. I've got to be able to visibly see what is happening from my workstation to my application.
Yep.
Not only how's it performing, but I got to log it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we've got to have, and this is where APIs come in, and I can start to, once I have a central source, a point of presence, a gateway where I'm collecting this data, I can send it off to a SIM, I can send it for logging, I can send it for additional inspection, I can send it to an API for my ITSM tool, right, for integration to it. I think that's one of the coolest things when you start looking at, I used to do it this way because it was simple and easy to manage. And now with automation, with machine learning, with APIs, and really this world of decentralized from a standpoint of everything has to be one vendor, that has opened up people starting to play nicer together. You're seeing more open source things. And so now I can feed into one centralized, I can take all of these different components and see one dashboard, one piece of glass to understand how things are performing.
What I really like about the shift that we're seeing is a lot of times the users feel that. They feel all this shift that we're talking about, adopting SASE. There's a user impact of that. What's really cool is we're talking about making the IT organization's lives simpler, if you will, combining all those aspects together, but also the end user's not impacted. The end user still gets to do their job day to day. They don't get to what, like we talked about in the beginning of this segment, is they don't have to go through extra hoops to access their applications, and the IT organization is kind of smooth too.
You talk about I have a good friend runs an IT organization of a mid-sized company, decently sized company, decently complex network, and he always says, as an IT professional, and which I think most of our audience probably is, he says, I get 2 grades. I get a C or an F, because the end user just expects it to work. Nobody knocks on his door and says, hey, it was easy to get into the network this morning, or that Wi-Fi experience was great. But the reverse is certainly true, when they can't get on and when they can't log in. And so when you start talking about how do I start to make these shifts, how do I start to get there, that's the biggest thing, is how do I do it without this negative impact? So I think that was a really great topic. I'm going to go radio host on us.
All right.
Let's pause. Let's go over to producer Lance. Lance, do we have any call-in, any questions? No, the boards aren't lighting up like we thought they were.
The phones aren't ringing.
No, long-time listener, first-time caller, got a little shy. No worries.
Yeah, no, all good. All right, so we've talked through some security stuff. We've talked through cloud and really just ubiquitous connectivity. I am really interested, John, on your take in when the pandemic first hit. I know you and I were out talking with clients every day about, hey, let's talk through SD-WAN at your house. That SD-WAN conversation certainly moved over to SASE, which we just talked about. Do you think SASE is more prevalent now because of the pandemic, or was it just a time that was coming anyway?
So I think the answer to that is both. I think a lot of things, just like I talked about cloud, the last guy on the IT staff that didn't want to go to cloud didn't have a choice anymore. Same's true with kind of what we would call the server huggers. I want to see the lights on. I want to see it blink. Here's one thing I would tell you, though. When you start talking about SD-WAN in my house, maybe I don't need that anymore because of SASE. When we start talking about this is permanent, whether you like it or not, we're here. And there can be a lot of really good things that come out of that. That can be talent acquisition. That can be not, being able to locate or to recruit, not locally, but globally. Maybe cost reduction. You start looking at contact center. But now you're talking about mission critical applications that are going home. We used to build these these call centers with redundancy, different paths into the building. Maybe I had different phone systems. I had servers in high availability. This is revenue generating. I can't lose this call center. Well, now your call center is literally shared. It's maybe a DSL in some parts, shared with 200 of your closest neighbors over an aged copper circuit. So when we talk about SASE and we talk about SD-WAN, they can be the same, but they don't have to be. And I think that's when we talk about convergence, I like to look at my SASE platform checking all of my security boxes. So cloud access security brokers, I want it to be my CASB. I want a secure internet gateway. I want back home routing so I can replace my VPN, data loss prevention, those things. And maybe that's enough for my end user. Maybe it's enough to have an application sitting on my desktop or PC at home, connecting to my SASE POP, which is sitting in the cloud distribution networks where those applications are.
Yep.
But maybe it's not just about getting closer to the application. Maybe it's about protecting a dirty link, right? A broadband circuit that has congestion on it. Maybe it's just about uptime. Maybe I can't have a call center employee be down for 4 or 5 hours, and now it's about a different type of connectivity. It's not easy to get 2 internet links into your house, and do you want to pay for that for your employee? So an SD-WAN strategy and a SASE strategy have to work together. Does not mean they are the same thing. And that's where I think it's important to look at the same way you would pick the right security vendor. Security and SD-WAN, I've always felt were separate. Now SASE and SD-WAN, still separate technologies. Can be the same company, but they do 2 completely different things.
Hey guys, we did have a question come in from Raphael. He says, remote workforce is nothing new. The last trend, work from home, see in a mass outsourcing to overseas partners. Of course, many prefer to work from home. What do you think that will lead to next? Smiley face.
Yeah, so I think the difference is the option or ability to work from home and the need to. Meaning, we started to see things open back up, and then we had a new variant come in, and people started to close down again and go back home. I think it's not about temporarily solving the problem. It's not about creating a path of, yes, I can work from home, but maybe there's certain applications I can't get to. The difference here is really work from anywhere. And I think that's more of a relatively new concept. I think you're going to start seeing people not necessarily a run for outsourcing, because I think customer service is still going to be critical. We're still going to have a need to connect in a meaningful way, collaboration, video, time of day operations. I think omni-channel from contact centers is going to become even more important. That's something that video chat hasn't really caught on, that's going to be driven. But I think the difference is, and what I hope people take away from our 30 minutes today, it's not work from home. It's work from anywhere, and it's thousands of new offices on your network. Your home is an office. And I think in the past, work from home, we treat it as doesn't have to be as good, or it isn't permanent. That's different now.
There's certainly been a cultural shift, right? Like working from home, you kind of felt on, especially if you had a corporate office like what we have right behind us, working from home, you kind of felt like you're on an island. But now it's certainly culturally shifted where, again, working from anywhere becomes a new normal. Sure, you're going to have outsourcing. We've always had outsourcing. We'll continue to have outsourcing. But working from anywhere does not necessarily have to go hand in hand with outsourcing. There's still job functions that are going to be necessary for you to be local, regional, national, whatever. Outsourcing isn't necessarily going to be the next step of your work from anywhere.
Yeah, and I think that the big thing is, in the past, the concept of I need to connect back to my network.
Yep.
That's what I hope our audience today takes away is we're breaking that idea that I've got to find a way to connect these users back to my network. We're extending our network to the user. Sounds similar, but it's a gigantic difference when we start talking about how we approach it. It's no longer creating a way for employee X to get access to the network. It's creating a way for employee X to be the network, to have zero trust network access, to have an identity broker. I know who this user is, I know what applications they can get to, and they perform the same as they did when they were in my office. But now they perform the same from their house, from their vacation rental property, from an airport, from an RV driving across the country connected with 5G. These are significantly different challenges than just throw a VPN client on. And I think that's been a huge shift.
As a leader or leaders within organizations, it's very interesting to me the talent pool now you have access to in work from anywhere. I mean, I know certainly, you know, when we've talked through candidates for different positions here and there, is the talent pool it's awesome. It's great that you can now expand your horizons and make sure you get the right person for the job.
Well, and in the past, there was this idea of it'd be hard to do this over video. It's easier to all get in a room. Well, now we've got 2 years where you didn't have a choice. And so a lot of people have adapted. You've seen more, you know, things like light boards to be able to illustrate your point better. People have started to present differently. You know, PowerPoint, never wanted 50 slides, but now you really don't because people's attention spans are different. And so people are adapting and moving. And so I think it'll continue that way. But I think as long as we build out a more flexible network, that's the name of the game. Is being ready for, if it is coming back into the office, if it is staying home, how do we build out that network that will continue to move with it?
Hey guys, are there certain solutions that you would recommend to work from anywhere, hybrid to permanent?
So I want to stay away from specific logos or OEMs for the conversation today, because the short answer is it depends on your business and your goals and what your business outcomes are, right? The C in the CBTS is consult. And so we don't want to throw something out without having a real conversation with your business. What I would say is from an ideology standpoint, convergence is key. So what is it that we can deliver from a SASE standpoint? I mentioned being able to check all of these security boxes with one platform, one SASE. How does that integrate with my SD-WAN strategy? How does that integrate with maybe a legacy network strategy?
Totally.
You know, I think multi-cloud, same way that we talk about network diversity, cloud diversity, I think is important.
And it depends on industry. I mean, think through that. Like, you know, retail is operating at a pace that may be different from healthcare or education. Whatever industry you're in is kind of dictate which way you need to go, because you're going to have a different problem to solve.
Yeah. So I heard a colleague of mine yesterday in a meeting with a customer said, listen, every OEM says they're the best. They get paid to be the best, to sell you the best, and our job is to stand in the middle. Right? Our job is to understand your business and understand their technology and understand how those two can marry and when they should marry and when they shouldn't. So I don't think there's necessarily a logo to throw out there, but I would love to walk away with this concept of security, network, application don't have to have the same logo on them. They just have to work together.
Yep. Yeah, I think we've kind of hit our time, Mr. Producer here. You know, anything else coming in?
No, I think we're good.
Okay.
So let's wrap it up. First off,
really.
Thank you for the folks who gave us the time. This is a really cool experience to get out and kind of do something different. Could have been a little bit cooler, but we'll take sunshine over rain. Let's walk away with a couple things. The first thing is, as we start to let's accept that this is permanent in some way, shape, or form. How do I deliver an end user experience that's going to start with the application, that's going to start with the network, and it's going to finish with security? Because I'm never willing to sacrifice my security posture for my end user experience. Sorry, Mr. or Mrs. Employee, security comes first, and then the experience. We want to partner. We want to talk about how do we tie all three of those things together. How do we bring our multi-cloud practice to the table? How do we bring app developers to the table to help you get to microservices, help you get to the cloud? And then how do we bring SD-WAN and how do we bring SASE to connect it and keep it secure? Those are the takeaways from today. It's here to stay, and we've got to focus on how do we do this permanently and efficiently.
And maybe next time, John, we can get out here again and we can talk it through kind of the future collaboration. What does that look like? And yeah, that's a next topic when we can break from there.
Hey guys, I think we need to answer one more here.
Oh, great.
As a recruiter, how are you getting your employees excited to come back to the office? A lot of my candidates will not accept an on-site opportunity because of work from home has become sort of norm now.
I think for me, John, I'd love to hear your take on it. For me, and I don't want to say that I'm entirely qualified to answer this. However, from my perspective, it's about making the office interesting and accepting that you're going to have employees that just don't want to come in.
Yeah.
And having a nice blend there. The office needs to be interesting enough. And what we're seeing specifically is, maybe more co-working spaces. It's a different environment. It's not coming back to a cubicle to talk. It's more of an open, collaborative environment. It's really what you're coming back to, not the workplace that you had 18 months ago.
Yeah, I think we're redefining what a workplace is.
Yep.
We're seeing these kind of shared community workplaces, whether it's co-hatch or a WeWork or something like that, right? The idea of there are some folks who don't want to come back. There are some folks who desperately want to get that energy off of their colleagues and have this collaboration. There are folks who want to do so, but they want to do so safely. And it's one of the things I've seen as people do start to come back, and this isn't necessarily addressing the question, so I do apologize, but we're seeing a huge increase in bandwidth because you're getting 20, 30 people coming into the office, and instead of meeting in the boardroom, they're sitting at their cubicles all doing a WebEx together.
Yeah.
And so there you have these multiple streams going on, and so these are just different dynamics. But I agree with you. I think creating a fun, flexible workplace, perks, maybe it's relocating somewhere with free parking, maybe it's cohabitating spaces. But the short answer is that's a personal decision, and the truest, shortest answer is from a recruiting standpoint for companies that are going to require it, they're going to have to pay for it. We're seeing the Great Resignation. People want that flexibility. They want to be able to work from anywhere. If you're going to require that your folks come in, you're going to have a responsibility to keep them safe, which is going to increase your cost, and you're probably going to have to offer more than you typically would in that job position. So maybe that will change over time, but I think when we start talking about permanently, especially the younger generation in the workforce, this is what is wanted, is that flexibility.
Yep.
Anything else? Any other callers on the line? I know we are over time.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. It's been fantastic. Like John said, it's great to get out here for a little bit and again, work from anywhere. And today just happens to be a fortunate place for us to work. So thank you all, and have a good rest of your day.
Yes, thank you, and hopefully we'll see you next time.
Thanks to John and Justin. Appreciate it. Take care.